You're listening to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
If you want to have guarantees, you have to buy a washing machine.
Fonte with a scooping header.
We don't lose a match, either we win or we learn. And today we learned.
It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Bella. Onside, 1-0. Buffon shot. Oh my word.
Unbelievable. He ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. It was very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast and newsletter dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans, and available right here on southamptondelivery.com. My name is Matt Markstone, and I am the host of the show, and no matter where you are, no matter how you may be listening, whether this is your first time or you've been here before, thanks for making the show part of your day. I hope that you enjoy it. And this is the first day of my summer. I had a wonderful conversation just a short few minutes ago with Jack, the man behind Saints News and Views on Twitter at SaintsFCViews. So it's been a long time since I talked to Jack, and I'll be honest, I was a little bit worried that we weren't going to have that much stuff to cover because we still haven't announced a signing, and really not a lot has happened in the past week or so, but not to worry. From transfer stuff to just investment in the club to the Financial Times article that came out around Gao. That is what Jack and I will discuss. We also took some of your questions, some of the questions from patrons and some of the questions from Twitter. So remember, you can always submit your questions or topics or discussion ideas, and we'll do our best to address them on the show and give you credit for that when we do it. So for anybody who's new, welcome to the show. I hope that you enjoy the conversation. If you are interested in subscribing, you can do that at southamptondelivery.com. There are links there that allow you to subscribe on a number of platforms. And if you have any trouble with that, just use the contact box or get in touch with me on social media. I'll be glad to help you out. So this was a great start to my summer. I hope it's a good start to your Tuesday if you're listening on release day or whatever day it is, no matter where you are. So enough of this. Let's get to the interview. Here's Jack from Saints FC News and Views. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon. We'd like to welcome back to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, Jack, the man behind Saints News and Views. You can find him on Twitter at SaintsFCViews. And Jack, welcome back. I know you've been busy with work and everything else, but it's been way too long since we talked.
It has. I think it might have been about a year since we've spoken. And then apologies, everyone listening to this. I've got a full-blown cold, so you're going to listen to me sound all nasally for the next hour. But hopefully it'll be made better by talking about all things Saints. But no, thank you for having me, Matt.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm sorry that it's taken so long with schedules and everything else, but I'm glad you're here. And, we were talking beforehand. There's slightly less pressure at the moment because Saints aren't playing, so there's nothing to kind of stress out about. But I think we'll still find there's plenty to discuss. But before we go too far into any of that, just for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, the show has grown in the year since you've been on. So could you tell everybody kind of just about your page and what they can find if they were to visit Saints News and Views?
Yeah, of course. So I set the page up in November 2012, and I started my career in journalism. I really wanted to go into sports journalism. So I sort of set up a platform in something I was passionate about, which was Southampton Football Club. And yeah, it just sort of became an interactive platform for what I hope sort of fans to be able to sort of find out the latest news, be able to sort of gossip about transfers or sort of results, and it sort of really acts as a platform as well for people to be able to share and comment their own individual views on particular subjects. So yeah, I'd like to think it's been quite successful. It's amazing. We passed 7,000 followers the other day, literally yesterday. Which is incredible to think that 7,000 people have sort of been on this sort of journey, so to speak. So no, it's been amazing. I love sort of getting the interactions with everyone, and yeah, it's been great. So you fancy sort of joining in the sort of little community, it's sort of at Saints FC Views, and have a look, and if you like it, sort of get involved with any sort of discussion that takes place.
Yeah, and we'll put the link to that in the show notes so people can just click straight from there. And if you're listening or you found it on Twitter, then of course you're right there and can get to the page pretty easily. But congratulations on the 7,000 followers. That's a big deal, and it's kind of nice because like when you get, like I remember like when I started the podcast account, it's like the initial kind of trepidation of like, what if this doesn't go well? Like what if nobody likes it? And then you get over it because you're okay. And then you get to 100, you're like, oh great, I got to 100. And then it's like what's the next milestone? And then it's like 5, and then 1,000 and whatever. And so I think at this point, do you pay attention to that very much, or just when you hit it, you're like, oh, this is great?
I think the milestones you do. So when it was coming up to 7,000, you're like, oh, I'm sort of nearly there. Can I do anything to push it over? But I think I don't like to call myself a creative at all, but when you have a creative platform like this, like you do, like you sort of, your page opened on, I'm just sort of looking at your page here, January 2017, and now you're on just short of 2,000 followers, which is incredible. And I think either way you look at it, I think you should never really get too bogged down on numbers if you're doing something creative. I think it's all about just enjoying what you're doing and really pushing it as far as you can. And there's loads of Saints pages and sort of different pages out there that are a real example of that. And I think you're valid for this. As long as you have fun and you enjoy running your page, that is the most important thing. Numbers don't really care for anything. I've never monetized my page. I'd never planned to, and it's just something I really enjoy. So yeah, I hope sort of people enjoy the discussion. Yeah,
I think for me, this has been a real creative kind of outlet. It is. I tell my friends that this is the only like creative thing I do. This is my one hobby, and it involves a number of things from like using Photoshop and Audition to scheduling it. There's a lot that goes into it, but I enjoy, I would say 99% of what happens. Sometimes I will sit down and go like, I do not want to re-record the intro because it sounds terrible. So that's like, I say that's my least favorite part. But really, I mean, the show is so much fun to do, and to be able to get to talk to people like you. And then, I agree with you in terms of the numbers don't matter. I try not to let them bother me. Sometimes if the show like goes through a dip or whatever, I just have to look at the long-term kind of projection of the show and realize that it's been, if you look at the difference between, even if I have a bad month, the difference between that month and like back when I started in February, or if you go back to February of 2017, like the first full month, like, the show has grown exponentially since then. And so even if I have a bad month now, like it's still doing fine and I'm still having fun. And that's really, like you said, what's important. I get some fulfillment out of just being able to sit down and talk to you and create all the stuff. And I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I think it's, John, honestly, we could do a whole podcast away from football about social media and sort of the creative platforms out there, and what's the reasoning behind it, and do you put out creative sort of content on a regular basis because you have to, you feel like you need to, or do you sort of wait to deliver content when you feel it's the best and when you feel like you're creating your own sort of to your own personal standard. So yeah, I think as long as you enjoy doing what you're doing, be that a podcast, be that a blog, be that a social media page, that is the main thing for me. And that's really been my mantra since I started the page. So yeah.
Well, I think it's awesome that you're enjoying it. And I think it's awesome that you allow so many other people to interact, and you do a good job of bringing other people into the conversation versus sometimes I get guilty of just putting stuff out there and saying, here it is, here it is, here it is. So I have to learn a little better from you and some of the other guys that are out there doing it. So I'll get there. But I mean, I know the season is over. But yes. And I know you said you've been busy with work and everything else. But like, how did this season treat you in terms of in terms of how it went and just with all of the kind of things that happened? Like, was there anything different about this season than last season in terms of running the page or anything like that?
Not. Do you know what? It's really hard. This was the second really successive season where we've been in a relegation battle. And it's not really, the start of the year wasn't enjoyable. I don't know about you, Matt, but it just wasn't enjoyable. I wasn't enjoying watching Southampton Football Club play. I lost touch with loving my club, which is a really hard thing to say because I've loved Southampton all my life. I've followed them all my life. But we had a really, really bad start to the season. We sort of thought Mark Hughes had come in and done a quite good job, kept us up. And then it just didn't start off well. Like I think if I'm right in saying, he was sacked after the 2-2 draw against United, I think it was, in December. We were in 18th place with only 9 points and one sort of league win from 14 games, which was horrendous. It was horrible, and it just wasn't a good time. And I think when it's going bad on the pitch, you can feel it in the community off the pitch. And I could definitely tell that in my own sort of reporting. I was getting really angry at the team. I was sort of expressing my sort of disconcern at the team, and it didn't feel right. So it wasn't a good start to the season. And then it was nice when it was kind of like a breath of fresh air when Hughes got sacked, because you thought, right, surely we can't employ back-to-back, like 3 bad managers. Like we'd had Pellegrino, we'd had Mark Hughes. You think, right, someone has to get it right. And they certainly did when Hasenhüttl sort of came through. I admittedly, I didn't know too much about him. I'd heard of him generally in Europe, and that he'd done a really sort of good job with a couple of teams that he'd been in. And I was excited. I started reading up on him. I started reading up on the formations that he was sort of bringing and what he'd done at these various different clubs, bringing them up through the different leagues. And for the first time, it was a little bit of glimpse of excitement came back to me. And yeah, from there, the season changed. I don't know about you. Did you feel like that?
Yeah, I think that, talking to some of the other guys who were doing shows, like talking to Freddie from The Ugly Inside and talking to Ben and the guys from the Saints FC podcast, it's like there was kind of this like, do we have to talk about this again? And it goes back to that kind of creative thing. Like, are we even in the right like frame of mind when I sat down? Like, was I really going to enjoy? I wasn't enjoying prepping for it. As I'm watching games, I'm just kind of like my notes in the second half would just tail off because we would concede, and I would just go like, I don't care anymore. Like, but yeah, there was I think the Hasenhüttl appointment definitely brought like a little bit of energy back to all of us, I think. And I remember we had already recorded the show for that week, and then Hasenhüttl was appointed. And it was like, well, let's call him back and do it again. Like we got to figure this out. And since he came in, I think there are still a lot of questions, and you can still see kind of, I think, where the team needs to improve, but there's definitely been there's a noticeable difference in how the team performed and the kind of the attitude of everybody around the club. I think it shows up in the fans that are in the stadium and everywhere else.
I think it was instantly he set the tone perfectly in his first press conference. He came in and you could see just the confidence oozing from him. It was radiating. He sort of identified places in our defence that needed tightening up. He sort of talked a little bit more tactically, and it just sort of sounded like, you know what, we've got a manager here who knows what he's doing. And he was so confident, and I think that confidence really transferred into the team. And sort of from that, we were picking up points. We won against Arsenal and Tottenham, and it was like we were going into games, and I was sat there thinking, we can win any game again. We we used to under Koeman and Pochettino. I'd go into every single game confident we could beat anyone in that league. And that was nice knowing that with Hasenhüttl. I think you're right to say that there are still issues in the team. I mean, he'd be a miracle worker if he turned us around in less than a season. So I'm really hoping. There was reports that he'd sort of only allowed himself a couple of weeks off, and he's already back in training, sort of planning and prepping. And I think, like you touched on, there are key issues that we need to address. But I'm super confident that Hasenhüttl's the right guy to be able to sort of get the players back in over the summer and say, right, we still survived. That was my main quote. But now it's time to step up your performance. I'm going to bring X, Y, and Z in, and we need to work on X, Y, and Z. And I'm confident that he's going to sort of make us into a team that's going to be best of the rest, top of the table, rather than looking under us consistently.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that's a realistic expectation for this season, or do you think that's it maybe takes a year? And I guess a lot of it probably depends on what happens in the transfer window. And there's a lot to be done, but I always worry about what can be done in the space of a year in terms of, how many guys can we find places to go, and then how can we afford to get the guys in even with some of that money? Because I have a feeling we're going to take losses on some of these people. If There's rumors of Elianusi going away, and you can't imagine we'll get back what we paid for him and things like that. But I don't know. So do you think you think this season that we're going top 10, or do you think it kind of all depends on what happens in the window?
I think, I think next year really sort of it revolves around how well we do in the window. I think there's a lot of, like you said, deadwood that needs to go. There's a lot of players that have come in and not been up to the standard that sort of need to go. We need to sort of clear out the likes of Jordi Klaasie, the likes of Carrillo, the likes of sort of Elianusi, the people who have come in and not done as well as expected. And you know what? That happens. Like, sometimes you can scout and watch the players' tapes as much as possible. For some reason, they just don't adapt to the Premier League. That's fine. But for my liking, there's been way too many players that we've bought in for quite large sums. And I feel like the larger we pay for, the more money, the worse they flopped. With Buffal, and there is a lot of deadwood in our team. And I think because and this is something that we'll probably talk about in a not so distant future, Mr. Gal came out and did an interview with the Financial Times, the short story was that he wants the club to be self-sufficient. He doesn't want to invest too much money in it. He wants money from transfers, from the money that we get from selling players, to then be reinvested into buying new players. So I think to be able to look at success short term within next sort of season, to be able to have any success, we need to be able to facilitate that by having some money in the bank, selling some of the deadwood, and reinvesting it into players that we find will sort of improve quality rather than quantity. Hassan Hüttl said he doesn't want quantity in the team. He doesn't want a big squad. And I quite like that mentality. I think it's right. If we only brought in 3 players or 4 players at a push, but they are quality players and players that Hassan Hüttl had identified will really improve his system and the way that he wants to play, I think that could really set us up. And I think there are key areas that we need to add to.
Yeah, I would say that maybe the only thing that I would worry about is, given the style of play that Hassan Hüttl likes to employ and the work rate that the guys have to have, you look at guys like Danny Ings who struggle with injuries. You look at guys that maybe their bodies may break down over the course of a season. We definitely have to have the depth that's there, but I do. If you look at how deep the squad is right now in terms of just sheer numbers, it's one costing us far too much each week to pay salaries, and that hampers what you can do in the transfer market. Because if we're going towards the Gao article, all of the money that we spend every single week or every single month on wages and everything else, like that's all money that could be used to buy a new player at the end of a season or during a transfer window. And so like those things have to go, and there's a definite balance. And I think I don't think we need to add squad depth at this point. I think we need to focus on bringing in, like you said, quality over those things. But I guess this is a good transition into that article. And in my, on reading it, it seems like everybody on Twitter and everybody on Instagram and everywhere that it was posted, everybody is up in arms about it a little bit. But I mean, is there anything new in there? Is there anything that hadn't been said before, other than it's actually coming from him, which we haven't really heard? The
quotes that aren't coming directly from him, the ones that I'm mostly concerned about, and what I have been concerned about is ever since it happened, was the legitimate sort of the reason why Katrina Lieber sold an 80% share. That is still something that confuses me. Her statement was that she wanted the club to kick on and she couldn't have the financial backing to take the club to the next level. Mr. Gal came in, and it was labelled and branded in the media as someone who's going to be able to kick us on and sort of take us up to the next step. However, my real worry about this is that Lander Sports Development, which Mr. Gal said is his chief source of income, reported a $13 million loss last year. And he lost control of the company in March, and he sold a 30% stake. So he has 24% in Lander at the moment, which sort of generates most of it from real estate. And from just brief research, they look like they're sort of branching into new business such as sports events. But that title really is a £13 million loss last year, his estate. So negative 13 million. So for me, I'm a little bit worried about the legitimacy of Mr. Gow, what his intentions are of the club, and whether or not really he has the financial impetuosity to be able to plough the money into the club we need. I love the idea of being a self-sustained club. I think it's so dangerous in nowadays modern day football to do what we did a couple of years ago, and you can really risk your club going down the pot. You just have to look at Bolton and Blackpool in recent years. All it takes is one owner who is just a little bit mad and has these sort of extravagant views about how to run a football club for your sort of football club to really go down. So I just worry about the legitimacy of Mr. Gow. Does he have the money to take us to the next stage? And if not, what's he doing with our club?
Yeah, I guess I don't see him. Just based on what he said, it doesn't sound like he's going to put any money in. And I don't know. I guess that the idea of self-sustaining, like you said, is good to me. But at some point, maybe you need some investment. You need to be able to bring those players in, and sometimes the club may not have it that season. One of the things that the article pointed out was just the revenue of the club itself isn't huge. It's not we're not a club that earns a ton of money. It says a generated revenue of just under just 152.6 million pounds in 2018 during the 2017-2018 season, I think, compared with 590 pounds received by Manchester United. So I mean that's a huge difference in the quality and things that we'd be able to bring in just in terms of what we can afford. And so if we're going to operate on that budget, then obviously, the team that we have as a result of that, I think it shows. Manchester United, I don't think, are getting everything they can out of their players, obviously, but you're talking that's a player and a half in some people. Some of these people are being sold for, like that we couldn't afford to buy those players because places like Real Madrid, Liverpool, Manchester City, they're paying, that's 2 or 3 players that they're bringing in just for what our club is generating all season. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. You know what? It's a really hard one. None of us will ever know Mr. Gow's real intentions. Is it a symbol thing? As a lot of things out in China I've been over to China, and a lot of stuff out there is symbolism. A lot of sort of rich businessmen go to the clubs. They'll buy a big Magnum bottle of alcohol. They'll put it next to the table for the whole night, and they won't touch it. It's merely a symbol for their wealth. Is this the same? Is Mr. Gow bought us to say, look at me, I can buy a football club, but he actually can't take us to the next level? None of us will know. Time will tell. But there's just a couple of things that are just a little bit worrying. It's that article that's come out, and then just the issues with the sponsorship as well. It sounds a bit dodgy. Like it's a Chinese startup company. And while it's being labelled as the deal was sort of nearly twice the 4.8 million it was last season from, I think it was Virgin, this company hasn't got a website. I don't think it's even started up yet. So there is a couple of worrying issues, and I think time will tell about how the developments of that go and Mr. Gow's sort of intentions. But yeah, that's one thing to keep an eye out on. It's just a couple of issues for me at the moment behind that, and we'd like a little bit more transparency, but I can't see the fans getting that. And we've just sort of got to sort of trust him and trust the personnel at the club that it's being run in the right way, and see where we go from there.
Yeah, the sponsorship kind of bugs me a little bit simply because, startups tend to not last. Most startups aren't around. They last a year or two, and they're sold, which means we could wind up with in 2 seasons, wind up with some random, sponsorship on the front of the shirt, or the contract gets terminated. Maybe there's a clause in there that says if the company is sold that, the contract ends then, or whatever it is, or sometimes they just fail. And so to kind of be relying on, I guess, £8 million a year from a company that doesn't have a website and we can't find and is going to launch this summer, like that doesn't sound great. That I can't imagine that their investors are super pumped on that, and it is a little bit worrying. And And I think kind of what you said about the status symbol stuff, I think that worries me even more. Because I mean, honestly, if I'm really thinking about it, if I look at kind of what the Liebers did in terms of how they ran the club and what they wanted for the club, like I'm good with that. And so if the new owner comes in and wants to continue that, I think I'm okay with it. But then you look at some of the other things that have had to happen. It winds up looking really, really bad when you kind of stack it all up and look at it just from take a step back and kind of look at it all objectively. It doesn't look good for Gowan. It's hard to justify really believing in what he said, even though I want to believe the best about him, you know?
Do you know what? It happens everywhere. Just look at the issues Man City have at the moment with accusations about their sponsorship and it all coming from Etihad and Sheikh Mansour's own company over in Abu Dhabi. It happens at the highest level. So it's no real surprise that it's happening at Southampton potentially. Time will tell. Let's see what it is. But unlike Lieber, there is no emotional connection for Mr. Gow at Southampton. So whilst sort of unfortunately after Marcus Lieber died, it was nice knowing that we had Katarina to run us for X amount of years because she wanted to do it in memory of her dad. There was sentiment and that she wouldn't want to do anything bad in memory of her dad. That was a nice sort of backbench to have as a fan to think, do you know what? Our owner actually has an emotional attachment to the club. They're running it because they want to, whereas you just don't have that with the new Chinese owner. So, yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Gao doesn't have any emotions, period, because he doesn't ever seem to show any of them.
Quite a funny interaction with him very early on. So I was lucky enough to be invited through sort of friends of friends to one of the games, and it was the first game in charge where Mr. Gao was present at the game, and we were in hospitality. And we sat literally a couple of rows back from Mr. Gao and all his family who'd flown over. And it seems like he does have a lot of personality. Like he was sort of waving his hand and I sort of introduced myself, said hello. And he was sort of taking pictures of a couple of people. So he has got that and it looks like he has got an enthusiasm. He has got an interest, but we just don't know how deep that runs yet.
Sure. It's kind of cool. Like that you actually had that interaction and were able to meet him and stuff like that. Cause I don't think, I think maybe that changes. I mean, at least it gives you kind of some insight. Cause from my perspective, sitting over here, I think I've seen him in a couple of pictures where he is like smiling maybe twice. He's waving, but other than that, like, because he doesn't talk a lot and because he doesn't do that, like, I don't have this idea of him, but I don't know. Hopefully we see a little bit more from him in terms of kind of what he wants. And maybe, I don't know, maybe if he just took a stand and said, this is what's going to happen. And maybe that's what he's done in this article. But if he does that, even if we don't like it, at least we know what the plan is. And right now, I think a lot of us he says it's going to be self-sustaining, but we don't even know what that looks like. And there aren't being really steps taken to show that it's going to work. You know, like we haven't sold anybody in the transfer window really. And so it's, I don't know, it's getting slightly more concerning as we move forward.
Yeah, let's see. I think for me, I've identified a couple of options and areas that we need to invest into, and I just really hope that the sales are made so then we can tackle the areas that I think we personally need to add to.
All right. I do have, I guess, one more question on the ownership. You mentioned the Man City owners. I mean, would you take that over what we have? Would you take the human rights violations and all those other things, or would you take the kind of what we're stuck with now, which is maybe a nice guy, but not necessarily willing to put the money in?
Well, I don't even know if he's a nice guy. I think when we first read up on him, I think when the Premier League was considering whether or not he was fit to run a club, I think there was some, do you know what, I don't really want to say it because I don't know whether or not it's true, but there were some allegations that of some corruption charges potentially over in China. I'd definitely have to look this up before it turns into some huge slander case. But yeah, maybe he's not even that nice a guy, but I don't know. It's a real sort of ethics versus, I don't know, it's a hard one, Matt. You've really sprung that upon me.
Sorry, I wasn't planning on asking that question, but I will definitely spend this afternoon looking up LegalZoom and how to incorporate so I don't lose my house over this podcast.
Let me give you an answer. I would want anything that means the success of the club. I mean, I'd like someone who's clean and has a clean history looking after the club. Or someone with a lot of money, a billionaire, could happily come into the club. Like there's Do you know what? A really good example of this is, I don't know if you've seen a couple of times, Richard Branson, the guy behind Virgin. He's been pictured quite recently at St Mary's, being actively there. The Saints have appeared in a lot of Virgin adverts. And he has got billions upon billions of pounds. And it's like, wow, would you like to sort of run our club? Like, come in and sort of help us, like, own us. And then I had a couple of people tweeting me saying, you can't support this guy. His ethics are awful. And it's that age-old debate. Do you want someone who could potentially turn the club into Champions League with the money like the Man City owners have done? But it comes with a bit of a dodgy past. It's a hard one.
Yeah, I think on the surface we'd all like to say we'll definitely, we wanted to keep it clean. But when the money's there and the players are coming in and the trophies are coming in and you're scoring goals and earning points and moving up the table, it's hard to, it's easier just to look the other way, and
bring the dirty in.
Yeah. All right. So, do you want to go transfer stuff now? Make us a little happier maybe?
Yeah, let's go to transfer stuff. I think it's exciting. It looks like there could be a confirmation on Tuesday of our new player coming over from Standard Liège. And I'm probably going to butcher his pronunciation now. I'll just go by his first name, Musa. I think unless you're a football expert and you love watching the Belgian league, not many of us would have known much about this new winger who's potentially going to come in. So Adam Blackmore said that it's all agreed. The fee is believed to be in the region of about £14 million. He's a 20-year-old player. And people obviously drawing comparisons to Mane, a young winger who comes from Africa. This guy is a Mali international. He's got 8 caps for his country. And hopefully after his medical, which apparently was passed last week in Paris, he will be a Southampton player. On the face of it, the stats look okay. It looks impressive. 2018-19, I think he had 39 appearances, 11 goals, 6 assists. Now, for a 20-year-old, I think that's quite impressive. What about yourself? What's your first thoughts on this being our potential first signing of the year?
I guess I would have said that if we were going to make a signing, maybe I would have wanted it to be in a different position. I think just looking at the transfer market stuff, it looks like he likes to play on the left side, and that's where Redmond plays. But Redmond, I think, doesn't have a problem moving centrally or moving to the opposite side. And I think he will fit in nicely. I think the pace is important. I think the work rate and the age actually, I think, fits the profile of the club. And I think Ralph likes also to work with young players. They're a little bit more, malleable. You have some raw talent that you can kind of mold and change, and they're not so set in their ways that they don't want to do the running. And I think that's going to be important. So I'm excited. I'm always excited by new players. And I think the idea that we're going to watch a guy kind of run and terrorize defenses and us be able to play balls through over the top to him, I think makes me happy, and it gives maybe some balance to Redmond and somebody else for the defense to think about. Overall, I think that makes me, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm interested to see how he kind of fits into the system and if he's ready to tackle a league like the Premier League, because of the Belgian league, from everything I know, is just not quite, it's not quite as tough.
Well, Mane left in, I think it was June 2016. So I don't think for a couple of years we've had that Mane player. We've not had someone who's aggressively pressing people. We've not had that direct threat. Redmond's flourished under Hassan Hutel. He's been one of the sort of best revelations that's come with Ralph. But we've really missed that player of Mane's sort of capabilities, his sort of flash of pace, his turn of pace, sitting on the last shoulder. And he knows where the goal is. And I really hope we get that with this Mali international who's coming to us. Time will tell, and as we know, Southampton fans can be quite ruthless, and I think there's always been quite a lot of pressure for players coming into Southampton to hit the ground running. And I think because we've been struggling in recent years, I think that will only be amplified next year. I think every signing will really be under spotlight, and they will kind of be expected to really hit the ground running. I'm excited for him. I think we need a bit of pace. I think there are other areas that we need to strengthen. I don't know if you want to come on to that next, Matt. You sort of highlighted a couple of areas. What areas do you think we need to sort of invest in?
I think if I had to pick a spot, it would be definitely up top. We got to find someone to play up top consistently that can score goals and also that can, be there if Danny Ings is injured. And I think that we have to get rid of at least one guy up top. And I think that will be Charlie Austin, but we'll see how that goes. And I also think we need a center back. I think those are the areas that we really need to improve. And whether that means a guy like Jack Stevens has to depart or he has to take a back seat. I think we need somebody who can really show that they can play in a back four. If this is the system that Ralph wants to use, the 4-2-2-2. Right now we just don't have two guys that look comfortable together, and I think we need a little bit of leadership back there. But in a back three, I think I'm okay with who we have, but I think we need some leadership back there. I think is most important. But so, I mean, on the wing, although it's nice to have a player that's out there, I think if you look at the squad, that would be one area that maybe I would say, maybe we could have gotten away with bringing Buffal back, and there's a question on that, so we'll get to that later. But for you, I mean, what areas of the team do you think need strengthening the most? Would it be that the center back and basically be either end of the pitch?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the new signing will move out to the left, and I think Hassan Hutel suggested quite late into the season last year that Redmond will play centrally. So I would suggest that if we're playing 4-2-2-2, Redmond will probably start up front with Danny Ings, and it'll probably be our new signing out on the left. And then it sort of leaves us with a right midfielder where Ward-Prowse has come on incredibly well this year. I think he's really earned and his rank to start every single game. He's been one of the sort of better players of the season for me. Middle of midfield, Højbjerg had an amazing season, really sort of developed and pushed on as a captain. Whether or not there's an argument for a new centre midfielder to come in, I think maybe, possibly. But my main issue at the moment is at the back. Hoyt is not good enough to play Premier League football. He needs to go. We can ship him out to wherever you like. I'll even drive him wherever the club needs to go. I don't rate him. He's not been good enough, and I don't really like his attitude that comes with it. I think he's had quite high profile fallings out and online spats with some certain people. So he can go. Bertrand is probably one of my biggest question marks at the moment. I think there could be quite a big warrant to bring in a new left back this year. I think there's rumours of Matt Targett going back to Fulham. Fulham apparently are rekindling their interest in him. And I don't personally think he's good enough to be a player of the standard that we need in the Premier League. I think a lot of people at Southampton Football Club get quite sentiment about the players who have been here for a long time. And realistically, we've got sloppy in sort of in sentiment and not being ambitious enough. I think since Bertrand came back from his back injury, he's not been the same player that he was. And I think if Targett goes, there's a real desire that we should bring in a left back who could compete, and be that Bertrand could even move into the middle, that he could play left centre back alongside Bednarak or Vestergaard, and then we could have a new left back out on the left, and then right back. I think Valerie stepped up hugely this year. I think he's been absolutely brilliant. But there's going to be a lot of pressure on him next year to consistently to be able to perform to the level we need. So potentially there might be question marks whether we bring in a right back. But for me, my main options I think we need to invest in is a left back. I think there's contentions whether or not we need to have a striker, but I don't think we will. I think Che Adams is probably on top of our list to bring in. I think he will be up there competing with Danny Ings, and I think that would be an amazing option to have. I mean, he's got, I think it's 22 goals last year. He's a young Englishman. He fits the Southampton quota perfectly. And I think if we bring in Che Adams, a left back, and maybe a winger and a centre midfielder, that would be perfect for me. But I'd be excited for Che Adams. I think he's exactly what we're looking for. He fits into Ralph's system. And he's really going to push Danny Ings to stay on his front foot and perform to a consistent level. And Danny Ings hasn't got that record of staying fit throughout the whole season. So I think it's good to be able to bring in another striker who can fill in for him if Danny's injured, or hopefully play alongside him for the whole season.
I wonder sometimes how true a lot of these rumors are, and if we are actually inquiring, or if it's just, somebody mentioned something in passing, or, I'm sure there's a list and people are going down the list and trying to figure out, who we can actually realistically bring in and what the prices are. And I mean, there's been in L'Equipe today, I guess, or maybe it was yesterday, that Mainz are holding out for 35 or 40 million euros for Jean-Philippe Mateta, I guess. I have no idea who he is, but that seems like a lot of money for a really young player. He's 21. And that's got to be us out of that race if that's the case. But we seem to be linked with people up top, which I think would make sense. But I'd rather see us linked with I don't want to say a veteran center back, but a solid center back, and somebody who can provide some leadership. And the Bertrand thing that you brought up, I think is interesting, because he has had some pretty serious injuries that have kept him out of the team. And like you said, he hasn't been quite as dynamic, and a lot of people were up in arms about JWP and Redmond not getting in the England squad this for the Nations League, but there was almost nobody kind of thought that Bertrand should be in there, whereas we just a couple of breaks ago, we all wanted Bertrand in that squad, and we felt he was the one being hard done by. And now I think he's fallen a little bit, and he is one of my favorite players, and I'm definitely guilty of being sentimental. But if you got to look at what the future looks like at that position, if Target goes, I'm not sure that would be a good bit of business on our part. I think he's got to stay around, because I'm not sure Bertrand's going to make it through an entire season without being injured. And I don't want to say we got lucky. We were fortunate that we had Valerie waiting at right back, and he was able to come in and prove himself. But I'm not sure we have that at left back at this point, even with Target in there. Target can cross the ball. Target is good from a dead ball, but he doesn't have the pace. He doesn't quite have I don't know if he doesn't quite have the instinct or the aggressiveness to do things that we would like. If you look at I think that's a huge difference between Valerie and Target, is the sheer aggressiveness that either of them possess, and that makes the teams somewhat lopsided going forward if you have that, and it's not always what we want. But although I say that, and then who was at the back post to head the equalizer in when Valerie crossed it against Bournemouth? It was Target. So maybe I'm wrong in that and saying that, but it's the team definitely. I think there are, the more we talk about it, the more holes there are to fill, and it's kind of it's not worrisome, but it would definitely have our work cut out for us.
I think it's going to be a hard one, because I don't think we're going to have the funds there to be as I don't think we're going to have the funds there to add as many players as we'd like to add. So I think Hasenhüttl's probably got a brief to say that you can spend X amount, and I think he would like to bring in probably 3 players. And I think one of them is going to be a left midfield, because it's all but confirmed and will hopefully be announced on Tuesday, sort of pending work permit authorization. Uh-huh. Second will be Che Adams, who will play up front. So that leaves us really with probably one more signing for the summer, which I don't think is ideal. I think there's more that needs to be done. But with one more signing, where does that one signing go, Matt? You've got one signing alongside a left midfielder and a striker. Where does that one signing go?
Center back.
Okay.
It has to be. And we needed somebody to that can step up there and do that. And like you said, I think Hoot has to go. Stevens probably has to go. And then you let those other 3 guys or 4 guys fight for that's those 2 spots. And then if we come up against a team where we have to play Man City away or something like that, and you want to go to a back 5 or a back 3, we have the ability to do that. But we have to be able to kind of play a system that Ralph wants to play, and if we can add something if we can solidify the back 4 enough so that we can play that system going forward, I think that will help us out a lot. Otherwise, it limits kind of the impact maybe some of the new signings we have, because maybe we can't get them in the team together if we have to wind up playing the extra center back.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot that we could talk about this all day, but And I think it's all about the players who go as well. You've got the likes of Cedric Suarez coming back. I don't think he's going to be signed permanently. Cedric Suarez could be one to go. Jack Stevens, I wouldn't moan if he went. Wesley Hoot can go. Shane Long, I think he's done enough for a contract extension. I think he did well towards the end of the season. You touched on it just then, Charlie Austin. I think he could potentially go. I think he probably might wait until his contract's over to go, but I can't see him really leading the line. He's not been great for a while. He's not scored the goals that he once did. Then you've got the likes of Sam McQueen. Question marks over whether or not he's got a long-term run in the Southampton team. I don't think so. Sam Gallagher, there's another interesting one. He's a young striker who's sort of been on the fringe of the team and had several loan moves out sort of the last couple of years. Is he good enough? I can potentially see him being moved on in the next year or so. Harrison Reed, he comes back from loan. A big thing for him. I've always liked Harrison Reed. I think he could potentially have a career at Saints, but I can see him probably being shipped off. So I think there's quite a lot. That's just 3 or 4 players that I've mentioned, and there's more to come. The likes of Fraser Forster, his career might be over. Jordi Claessy, Carrillo, Sofiane Buffel. There is really about sort of 10 players that could be potentially sold this summer. Mm-hmm. And that's quite the exodus to get rid. But I quite like that. I like the idea that it's a real sort of fresh slate, so to speak. If we can recoup some money from them, it brings a lot of potential into the side. And I just really hope that Ross Wilson, the recruitment team, really sit and listen to Hasenhüttl. Everything should go in. It's a hard one. The balance between giving your manager too much power and not enough power. But you have to give trust in Hasenhüttl for me. He's shown enough that he has what it takes to make this club a better team. So I'd really like to see him given the resources this summer and really the sort of the nod for signings, the yeses, the nos, the who he wants in, who he wants out. I really hope that he's given the sort of the ability to do what he wants and to be able to create and craft the team that he wants.
Well, I know that I think that the club are aware of what they need to do in terms of working with Hasenhüttl, and Adam Leach mentioned on the Total Saints podcast a while back that when Hasenhüttl came in, he made some, not demands, but some things that he wanted very apparent. And even to the point that some of the journalists, I think he was referring to himself and then Adam Blackmore, they looked and they kind of went like, I can't believe you're going to do that for him. Like, I can't believe you're going to give him that power right now, because there's the risk of giving him too much. And then if he goes, then what happens and what the power vacuum and everything that happens after that. But there's also the risk of running him off in terms of, when Koeman came in and there was that conflict in terms of what was going to be spent and things like that, and he just chose to leave. So there's this balance that the team has to find with the manager and how they're going to work that out. And like you said, I hope they will, because there's definitely, we've missed on transfers over the past couple of seasons. We haven't spent exorbitant amounts of money because the price of football players is going up. But if you look at the amount of money that we spent and what we've gotten for it, it hasn't been recouped in that. And I'm almost to the point where I would take a loss on some of these guys just to get them off the wage bill, just to get them out of the squad and kind of give the team a fresher, lighter feel. And so that when Hasenhüttl is looking at the team in the locker room and on the training pitch, he's not looking at a bunch of guys who know that they're not wanted, Yeah.
And I think even off the pitch, there's going to be a big summer for us. So our chairman position is currently vacant. And I think there's going to be quite a reshuffle in terms of how the clubs run off the field. Who's going to come in and is Les Reed's position going to turn into a couple of different positions? So I think there's going to be quite a real reshuffle on and off the field at Southampton this summer, which is exciting. I mean, it wouldn't be Southampton if it wasn't the case. But yeah, it's a big summer, and you just sort of, with Southampton, you've got to cross your fingers and just hope and pray it all sort of works out, really, because we've got history of it going extremely well, then history of it going not so well. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, let's get on to some of the questions that people sent in, and we won't have time to get to them all, but that's okay. People can send in their questions on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or the best way to make sure your question gets answered or has a better chance of getting answered is by joining Patreon at patreon.com/SFC delivery. By doing that, you get access to a private chat, access to an extra podcast per month, and you get a priority for having your questions answered on the show. So we will jump into some of the Patreon questions and then get to some from Twitter as well. Won't have time to answer them all, but we'll do our best. So first up, let's change it up a little bit. Kevin McGee says, what are your thoughts on the new kits? I saw them in the club shop today, and whilst I don't mind the kits, those big blue sponsors look terrible. So what are your thoughts on that? On the three that we've been shown so far, and kind of how they look, and the sponsorship as well.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? It plays such a tiny role in the football season, but it seems to get the biggest reaction from it. And it's either, I think any kit release is a Marmite thing. You love it or you hate it. And for me, I hate it. I really don't like the new kit. I went into the shop the other day, saw it, and I didn't like it even more. No, I don't really like the home kit. If you want my honest answer, I love the third kit. I think it's the white one. Mm-hmm. Really like the white kit. I think it's amazing. I love the picture of Vestergaard in it. I think it looks brilliant. Love that one. Kind of wish that was our away kit. But the away kit isn't as bad as sort of the black and yellowy, I think it is. But you know what? I'm not too bothered about the kit. As long as we play well, we could have the most horrendous kit, and I couldn't care less. But it's my initial thing is I don't like the home kit. I like the away kit, and I really, really, really like the third kit.
It seems like Under Armour is really taking that upper shoulder area, and they feel like they have to do something different with it on all the kits. Like it can't just be a solid kind of color, if that makes sense. And yeah. It's that black on the home kit, I think is a little bit worrisome. It just I'm not sure how it looks. I'm not sure how I'm gonna like it. But people you mentioned you saw it in person and didn't like it. Some people said they saw it in person and they didn't think it looked as bad. I think the away kit is, I like it. And I would say if I was going to buy one, it would probably be that one, just because even though I like the third kit better, I can't keep a white shirt clean. Like I struggle. So, I think the third or the away kit would be good. And it's definitely going to stand out. And I think it will, I'm a big Football Weekly fan, and Max Russian hates the awkwardly colored, away kit with no connection to the club, like there's no tradition there, and he will say that's unnecessary. But I think we'll just have to kind of put up with it, and hopefully it doesn't come off like neon yellow. I think like maybe it was Huddersfield's away kit that was pretty atrocious to look at. It looks like a bunch of highlighters running down the pitch. So as long as we don't get that, I think we'll be okay. And if you were going to buy one, which one would you, if you were forced, which one would you take?
What I really like about the third one is the level of detail that it has. So you said there's quite a big focus on Under Armour from the sort of the nipple onwards, so to speak. And the collar's really nice. I like the collar. I like the fact there's two colours on it. I like the fact you've got the red with a little bit of blue, and that blends really well into the sort of the darker blue with sort of red stripes going across it. And then that really works with the white colour. It's like they really, really thought the third kit out very well with a lot of detail, and then they've gone to the home kit and just sort of taken an old kit and then just whacked a black line across it and filled it in. So yeah, I would definitely buy the third kit. I'm not really one into buying new kits. I quite like a sort of a retro kit or an older kit. I don't think I've bought a kit in years. I sort of have the older ones still up that I wear. But if I were to buy a kit, it would be the third kit, the white one.
I'm guilty of waiting till the end of the season when they go on sale to buy them. I shouldn't say this out loud, but I'm fairly certain my wife bought me this past year's home kit for Father's Day, just because I saw the charge on our account from Southampton. And after doing the quick math translation or conversion, it's it's definitely not the new one. So, which I can appreciate. But yeah, I think like you said, it is kind of a small part, but it's something that we like, and that is something that generates revenue. And I'm gonna take a step back from the questions real quick, and part of what the team wants to do, and if you want to increase the kind of the revenues, you have to get the fans engaged. And I think a lot of fans have been really upset about things at the club lately. And I don't know if you've looked into this already, but I just happened to click over to the events section of the website because I was looking at the Saints Fest stuff that they're trying to get people to go to. And it looks like, like things like Saints Fest, the Father's Day lunch, like is this stuff that you see as being important to the team, or is this like a passing kind of maneuver by the club? Is this not something that's really a focus, or do you think they are actually trying to get the fans more engaged?
That's a good question. It's a really good question. I think they had to bring in revenue in the off season. I think they brought some really good events there. So we had Rod Stewart there recently. They had Take That there recently, which obviously benefits the club financially somehow. I don't know the ins and outs of that. But yeah, like Saints Fest, I think they are generally ways to probably both generate a bit of income. I don't know. I think it's £2 a ticket. I don't think it's that much. But I think it's also a way to engage the fans. And I think Southampton are very good in finding unique ways to engage with the fans. You only have to look at our kit launch video, which was incredible. It went viral for good reason. So I'd like to think of this as a sort of a good way for them to engage fans. They did the forum. I think they are progressively being a little bit more open, which is great.
Yeah, I think that they're definitely trying, I think. And it's it'll be interesting to see how many people show up to the Saints Fest and how it's talked about afterwards, and see how that goes. And the tickets aren't expensive, and I think under a certain age are just free. And but they're trying to get people in and around the stadium and in and around the club. And I think going back to like season ticket prices and stuff, if you lower those season ticket prices just a little bit, you cut down on some of the revenue you earn there, but you get more people. You make sure the stadium is always full. You make sure those people are going to come in and be able to buy food and things like that, and buy a kit, and that stuff will eat up. Kits are not cheap. Food is not cheap. And so if they're doing that, if they feel like they can go there and do that every week, you probably make up that money, and you have a better atmosphere in the stadium because people are just generally happy to be there. But let's move on. Here, I think we talked about Rob's question. It says, in the wake of transfers as well as speculation over transfers, who would you sign from the players we're linked with? I think we talked about that. I think we talked about, we'll take a Janopo or who we're linked with, and should be announced probably as soon as this podcast is released, which is generally how it goes. And I think we'd take, Che Adams, but we also maybe need a center back. But I don't know. I think I think the other ones we kind of talked about it as well. Except it was Justin's question real quick. It says it looks like we're bringing in the winger, and we talked about that. And then Che Adams, how do you think those work into the system? I think you spoke about that a little bit earlier. I imagine it will either be Che Adams or Ings in the team, or maybe Che Adams and Ings up top, and then Redmond directly behind. I think that could work. But I think that it means that somebody like JWP probably has to miss out, or maybe Romeu misses out in midfield and JWP sits a little bit deeper. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it all depends on the system that Hasenhüttl's going to play. I think the new signing from Mali, from Standard Liège, will come in and play on the left. And I think if Che Adams comes in, it'll either be Che Adams and Ings up front, or it'll be Che Adams and Redmond up front. I think Hasenhüttl wants to play Redmond through the middle. So if we assume that Hasenhüttl is going to play a 4-2-2-2, then the natural thing to probably do, the strongest, would be to play Che Adams, two recognised strikers up front. So that would be Che Adams and Danny Ings, and then have new signing on the left with Redmond on the right, and then Højbjerg in the middle holding with Ward-Prowse or Lemina. I think if you want to talk about the strongest on paper, I think that's it. But I think it's nice. Che Adams really changes the mix. I mean, it adds competition. If Hassan Hüttl's going to make sure that Redmond, Che Adams, Danny Ings and Shane Long are competing against himself, I think that's really healthy competition. So it is exciting to see what's going to happen. But in answer to the question, I think it'll be a battle between Che Adams and Danny Ings to sort of start. Whether or not they'll play them both at the same time, sort of we'll find out in due course. But be interested to see how they sort of line up.
Yeah. And I think we all know, and maybe Hassan Hüttl's even expecting, that Ings will not be able to sustain, 90 minutes week in, week out, all the way down the season. So we definitely need that other striker. And I don't think you can bring in a guy that of much quality without at least kind of promising him a shot to start. We can have Shane Long come off the bench and run for 20 minutes. I think that's fine. But you need somebody who's going to consistently score goals, and Ings is pretty good about dropping deep and setting things up. But we also need some people to be able to run in behind and create some movement and things like that. So we'll see how that all goes. And we'll get to one more question here from Twitter. This is from Christian Candler, who was on the show last week, is at Candler Nero. He says, do you think Buffal should be given another chance? And I think it's an interesting question, given that we're signing essentially another winger. Do you think that that's somebody that maybe we could have gotten away with bringing him back in and having him be like a new signing, or do you think he needs to go at this point?
It's a really hard one. For me, I've always been a massive fan of Buffal. I think he has got the real potential to be a great player. He's just not shown it yet. It doesn't sound like he had an explosive year over in the Liga. I think he played, 25 games, 10 off the bench, 3 goals, 3 assists, which would probably say is maybe a bit below average, I would say. But I think a lot of people on Twitter are seeing what Hassan Hüttl has done to Redmond, what he's done to Ward-Prowse, and saying, do you know what? Could he coach Buffal to be the player that we expected him to be when he first joined? I would love to see him given a chance in the team. I really, really would. And I think early reports suggested that Hassan Hüttl would have a look at him when he comes back from loan. Does the new signing of the guy from Standard Liège sort of change this? Maybe, potentially. Me personally, I would love to see Sofiane Buffal come back in, fight for his shirt, and sort of really be a part of the team. He's got unbelievable skill, and a couple of years ago we saw him change the game in seconds. So if he did that on a more consistent basis, like Redmond's done this year, then it'll be like a brand new signing, and we can really then justify the price tag that we spent on him a couple of years ago. So let's see. I just really think I think if he's going to come in, his attitude needs to change. I don't think he has the work rate required of Hassan Hüttl. And I think if he adopts Hassan Hüttl's sort of approach to playing and really steps up, I think he's going to be an amazing new signing for us. But if not, then if he doesn't bring the attributes that Hassan Hüttl wants, and he doesn't bring the desire or the effort, he'll just go.
Yeah, and I think he'll be on an extremely short leash. Like, I don't think he'll have a lot of chance to prove himself. No. Just simply because the history is there, and even though there's a new manager, some of the other management staff is still around, and you can't imagine them. Sometimes that reputation is gonna be difficult to get away from. And I think the only thing that I think if you look at the stats from La Liga, it's Messi is the top of everything, I think, except for dribbles, which I think Buffal beat him on or whatever, and that's great. Which means we all knew he can dribble, we all know he can dribble, we've seen him do it. It's just the other things. Can he make the right decision after he's done that? And that's something that Redmond needs to improve on as well. We've seen a couple of times this year where he's gotten slightly more aggressive, which is good. But I think Buffal could be a real weapon for us, but he has to adopt the work ethic, like you said, and we don't have a team like where we can afford just to have somebody who only chooses to play offense. And I think Ralph did a good job of letting Redmond know that and know he has to contribute more defensively, and Redmond did it. If Buffal doesn't do that, then I think we'll be done.
Just really quickly, he's 25. One more year, 2 more year, he's getting on the older end of an attacking player.
Yeah.
So he's no spring chicken who's got this utmost potential or he's promising. It's his time to knuckle down. he doesn't have much longer probably to sustain himself as a top quality player. It's a massive year for him. If he digs in, like Redmond last year, he, in the off-season, went over to LA. He trained with Daniel Sturridge in the off-season. They did a lot of fitness stuff, and he came back, and you could just tell that there was an enthusiasm, there's a hunger, there was a real sort of match fitness. I would love Buffal to have that mentality. I would love it to have that mentality, because he would be amazing for us next year if he pulls his finger out and works harder for the team and becomes a team player and matures.
Yeah, it's going to be super important for him to make sure he does that. And I think if he does, like we said, it'll be great. If not, he just won't be around. And once again, I think I'd be willing to take a slight loss on some of these players to get them out if they're not benefiting the club in any way and they're not benefiting the locker room and things like that. But I realize also that's maybe not a popular opinion, but maybe also not a viable one either. So the club has to sustain itself somehow, and losing a bunch of money on players isn't going to work. So anyway, Jack, do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, just really, I am looking forward to a new season. I'm optimistic under Hassan Hüttl. I think he's the man to bring us forward. And please, to the board, because I know the board listens to this podcast religiously, please just give Hassan Hüttl the funds he needs. And I really think this man can really turn us around. I mean, there's questions over his longevity. Is he going to stay here for a couple more years? I don't think he's long term. I think he's got his sights set on a big club in Europe. But let's ride the wave whilst he's here and get us in a good position. And I really hope we have a great summer. Bring in the players that he wants, and let's look up the table next year. Let's not have to look down. I don't want to be competing. No offense, I don't want to be competing with the likes of Brighton. I want to be back. I want to be better than Bournemouth. I want to be looking up the table and really sort of enjoying football again.
Yeah, it'll be nice to be trying to track people down to, just for a little bit more money, or potentially a European place, rather than trying to just stomp on the fingers of the person that's trying to grab your ankles as you're coming towards the end of the season. So, I'm there with you. And in terms of great summer, this has been a great first. This is the first thing I've done on my summer vacation. So thanks for talking to me, and we'll put this thing together and get it out tomorrow morning for everybody over in the UK and everybody else around the world who listens to the show. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you doing this, and I have to do a better job of getting you back on the show sooner rather than later.
Well, we'll let the viewers decide that. Maybe not. But the podcast is amazing. I've loved it since day one. Keep up with the hard work. It really has gone from strength to strength. Thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, come on then, up the Saints. We're going to have a good year, and we're going to hopefully, I'll be on next year, talk about it, and we'll be challenging for something, the best of the rest, rather than talking about the relegation battle. I've got all faith.
All right. Me too, and I'm looking forward to it. That does it for this episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Special thanks this week goes out to Jack from Saints News and Views. If you don't already follow him on Twitter, you should do so. It's at SaintsFCViews. Lots of good stuff coming from Jack. Always honest, always a conversation happening. So be sure to give him a follow if you don't already. If you want to follow this show on Twitter while you're there, we're at SFCDELL_IVERY. We're also on Instagram at the same address, and we're at Facebook.com/SFC Delivery. There is no underscore in the Facebook address. If you're looking for a way to get in touch with me, you can email the show. You can use any of the social media outlets that I just mentioned, and you can get to all of them at the show's website, southamptondelivery.com. You can also subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Google Play, TuneIn Radio, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And while you're there, do me a favor, leave a review if you would. There were a couple left last week, one positive, one not so positive. We'll take all the feedback you have. So yeah, get in touch, leave a review. It helps other people find out about the show, and I really do appreciate it. The show would not be possible without you as listeners. It would not be possible without my partners at the Southampton page. So if you don't follow the Southampton page on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, be sure to do that. They have lots and lots of news coming out. They're keeping you up to date with everything that's going on in the transfer window. That is what they do, and they do a very good job. The logo for the show is designed by Matt Beeling of the We Are Southampton page. He is so good at his job. that now the club pay him to do that job. So give him a follow at We Are Southampton. Thanks to Matt for everything that he's done. He's helped bring the artwork along. All music for this show comes courtesy of the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The intro song is Epic Song by Boxcat Games, and the end of show credits that you're listening to right now is Aim is True by Poddington Bear. I have thoroughly enjoyed this first day of this first episode of the summer. I'm officially on break, and at this point, I'm going to go enjoy it. So until next time, remember that together, we march on.